Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on project management within 3D Experience. We will mainly be focusing on the DPM role today. We will get into that a little bit more. And to introduce myself, my name is Mark Young with XLM Solutions, and my contact information is here. The webinar will comprise of PowerPoints and then a video at the end. Most likely it'll probably be easiest to hold questions till the end, but if a question does come up and it makes sense to answer it, on the spot, I will do that as well. Please, put your questions into the chat for me to answer. With all that being said, quick overview on XLM Solutions. For those of you who do not know us, we consider ourselves a complete PLM solution provider. We're not a VAR, we don't sell software, but we're recognized and certified by many different PLM companies to provide professional services on their PLM products, with Dassault Systems 3D Experience being a key one. We've been around since 2005, so we're a well-established company with many years of experience, and we're highly respected for both our business expertise within the PLM industry, providing best practices and latest trends, along with our technical expertise for deploying, great technology based on, the latest technical solutions out there. As mentioned, we're not a reseller, but we're a partner of Dassault and a certified professional service company of SolidWorks, which is a subsidiary of Dassault. We're always dedicated to providing excellence and quality in what we do. As mentioned, we're always looking for new trends, best practices, technical solutions out there to provide our solutions. And as mentioned, we are a full PLM solution provider. We do everything from general implementations, discovery workshops, general implementations, customizations, integrations, for example, integrations to ERP, data migrations, and then training and support. So let's get into it. This slide you see here, really, I took it right from Dassault marketing material. But basically, to sum it up, and you can read it as we go, many times project managers are spending non-value added time tracking down data, talking to people, going to other systems to collect data, etc. And we look at that as time wasted, where they could be really spending time on more value added parts of project management. So identifying and dealing with risks, helping to best provide resource schedules or scheduling resources, general execution of the project. So the project management apps within 3D Experience are geared to help the project manager reduce the non-value added time and focus more on value added project management tasks. Again, this is from Dassault marketing material, but to go through the points and a little bit to repeat what I said, with project management in PLM, you can really gain real access to the project scenario and decision making. So not only does the project manager have access to the project plan and the related data to the project, but anyone in the PLM system can see it and access that. So there's no situation where someone changes a project plan and it doesn't get emailed out or communicated and someone's looking at something that's out of date. The real-time project plan is maintained in the system, and everyone who has access to the system can see that. Increase resource utilization, reduce conflicts between project manager and functional groups. That's kind of saying, all the data is there for the project manager to see the functional group data, and the functional groups, i.e. engineers, to see the project manager data. In theory, decision-making processes can be done better, based on having that data there, and in a sole system. Again, things can be more efficient, making use of predefined templates, and different project management functionalities such as phase, gates, and milestones. KPIs, tracking of what's going on the project as a whole, again, can be done having it all in a quote-unquote database system for reporting and viewing of such KPI information. And then finally, streamline execution. You can have, programs, we'll get into that, or that have multiple projects in it and can look at it from a top-level view or break things down to projects and see the data in more manageable bits. So again, this is all marketing language coming from Dassault, but hopefully you'll see how these key points are shown within the solution. So within 3DEXPERIENCE, there's various project management roles. The one that many people are familiar with is DPM, or project manager. And I would say this is more of a waterfall project management solution. Waterfall, where you have your project plan, you might have milestones, gates, phases, and tasks dependent on various tasks. And looks like a waterfall as it cascades down from one task to the other. We'll be spending a lot of time on that within this presentation. There is also, though, a role called XPP, and notice the -OC, that stands for on cloud. So XPP is an on cloud solution for project management, and this is more geared to agile methodology, small project groups that are fairly agile in method. The project plan is changing constantly. In addition to that, for people who are on premise as well, there's also collaborative tasks, which is another way to manage tasks in a very agile method. Collaborative tasks, I would say, are very similar to like Jira tasks, for example, within a task management system. And then finally, there is Project Portfolio Manager, or DPS. This really provides more analytics and reporting on the project. So this will make use of the Dassault Exalead technology. It does require extra services from an installation point of view, plus licenses, but allows you to do more reporting, tracking, dashboarding of project information. So within the project management functionality, and to go back a slide, I'm mainly here talking about DPM, which comes with both on cloud and on premise, and is the traditional project management functionality within 3DEXPERIENCE. Here are some key functionality to go over. So obviously you have project tasks, the typical Gantt chart that comes with project management, and you can manage your task milestones and gates, and show that within dashboards as well. You have project templates. So you can create various project templates, for example, product introduction template, and have the various tasks and data associated with it. And every time you're actually going to introduce a new product, you can instantiate that template into an actual project and use it instead of recreating the project from scratch each time. You have the ability to manage documents and associate documents to the project, and this can be done, both in what's considered project bookmarks, which are a way to organize data specific to the project, or general bookmarks, which makes use of the general bookmark functionality to managing documents within the platform. And documents can be associated to a project, it can be associated to a task. There's various areas where the documents can be associated to data within the project. The ability to track issues, meetings, and decisions associated to a project. So, you can say, have your list of issues associated to the project. You know, obviously with any project issues, which is spelled wrong, will come up. But you know, how do you tackle issues? First, you need to make a list of the issues. So it's a great way to put the information there, and then you can also track, meetings on the issues, decisions made on the project or how to deal with the issues, etc. To have that in one central place of access, so it's all documented and reflected within the organization. You're able to assign attachments, as mentioned, to tasks, but you're also able to assign deliverables to tasks. So a deliverable is just a special attachment that basically says, the output of this task is this deliverable, i.e. this document, whether it's a CAD drawing, a Word document, whatever that work product or deliverable is, you can assign it to a task. And there's some automation in the system. So for example, when that deliverable gets released, the task can also reflect that it's now 100% complete. So there's some intelligence between the deliverable itself and the task completion. And then finally, there's some general reporting, which we'll talk about. Project management also has, and I would say what I just talked about is, probably the general functionality, but there's also what I consider advanced functionality provided through project management. So you have the ability as a project manager to request resources to be used on the project. These are resources which are people or users within 3DEXPERIENCE. But when you request a resource, it basically goes to a resource manager that's configured under the company or the organization which the user belongs to. And then that resource manager can say, yes, this user is available to work on the project or not. It can go to quote unquote the user's manager to authorize them to work on the project. There are resource planning reports. So if that same user is working on 10 tasks, he could be overutilized. In many cases, the project manager does not know he's working on other tasks. So if the tasks and the resource assignments are all managed in the platform, you can run some resource reports and see if that resource is overutilized, underutilized, etc. Risk management, you have the ability to create risk objects in the system and track the risk and visualize the risk in a graphical form. Project baselining, so you can take a snapshot of the project in time and then see how that compares as the project progresses in the future. So at this time we were on track, but 3 weeks later we're now behind schedule. So you can compare baselines in time. You can also make project experiments. So you can, in theory, clone the project, an active project, and make changes to it, whether it's resource, time, changes, etc., without affecting the existing running project. And then based on the experiment, if you like the changes, you can propagate them back into the current running project. There's ability to manage budgets, how much money is associated to the project, and then burn down rates, regarding resources, cost, and other costs associated to the project. And there's the ability to have timesheets. So users associated to projects can report time they spent on the project per week. So we'll get into this. I'm not going to say use 3DEXPERIENCE as your total timesheet solution, but you can manage time and have users associate time to projects within 3DEXPERIENCE. Getting access to projects. So, there are various widgets or icons within 3DEXPERIENCE you'll see that brings up different project information. So within the DPM, what I call the traditional role, there's 3 types of widgets. There's My Projects, which show a list of all your projects that you're associated to. risk management, which will bring up this risk management widget, which kind of can show you the various risks and where they stand within the project. And then there's a project management widget, which will give you access to the actual project plan, project reporting, etc. And that's if you have the DPM role. So this is an additional role you have to purchase. With the CSV role, which is the default role users get, they get project execution, which is very similar to project management. These two show you the same data here, but with project management, it gives you the ability to change the schedule, add tasks, assign resources. It's almost like an editor functionality within the project management. With project execution, you can really just view tasks and change your completion on tasks. So it's more of a view or a participation role, where here's more of an editor create projects role. And then also there's a widget to show the Gantt chart from the dashboard. So the majority of these roles are done in the 3D space. The traditional, let's say, Innovia interface, but risk management and Project Gantt are done through the dashboards user interface. There's also the concept as programs, as mentioned. Programs are a collection of projects. As you can see, we have a program here, and various projects belong to that program. And it's just a way to organize your projects. And there's some high-level reporting that can be done at the program level or the project level. And you can also have sub-programs within programs. So to start a project, there's various ways to start a project. You can create a project from scratch. You can instantiate a project from a project template that you already created in the system. You can create a project from an existing project that you have running in the system. And you can import a project from Microsoft Project or CSV files. And for example here, within 3DEXPERIENCE, if you're in the, go to the project management role, from the plus sign, you can see where you can create projects or programs. And you can see you can create various types of projects or programs or other data. So a program is a collection of projects. You can create a blank project where you create it from scratch. You can create a project from an existing template. You can create project concepts, which are, I'd say a lightweight project or not a full-blown project. It might be something you just are contemplating and want to see how it looks. And, if the business buys off on it, you can, turn a project concept into a real project. So don't have a lot of real, real user scenarios that are customers using it. Same goes to business goals. You can put a business goal into the system, but don't know of anyone really using it, nor have we really focused much on diving into business goal functionality. I think it's a little bit light, but something to explore if there's a possible need for it. Creating a project. So when you, I would say, when creating a project, in many cases, projects are created from templates, so you don't have to recreate everything. And templates can create a lot of information. So you can have the different phases, gates, milestones, all the Gantt chart information there. You can have resources already assigned and automatically associated to the template. You can have different folders or data structured assigned to the template in various documents. You have very budget information assigned to the templates as well. And the thought process is as projects execute, based on lessons learned, you can go back and update the templates, to better function when new projects are created from them. Also, within templates, it's kind of cool. You have the ability to create questions. So if you think about a template that may cover a project, but when the project runs, it may cover 100% of a project that has many different scenarios with it. But when the project runs, only some of those scenarios need to be tracked and managed. So you can have questions you put in there, and when you start off that template, it will ask the user these questions. Are there going to be new requirements, or is there going to be a new design activity? And based how they answer those questions will determine if certain parts of the project plan get placed in the project or are excluded from the project. So you can tie, project structure, project tasks to questions, and based on how they're answered, they will show up in the project or not. And here you can see we're creating a new project template. We can give it a name. We can associate questions to it and fill in some other various information regarding that project. You can also create projects from existing projects or importing it from spreadsheets. So in this case, we are creating a new project and we're picking the source project to build that new project from. In this case, we're creating a new project from file, and we're picking a CSV file to import that project information from. And then finally, we can import projects from Microsoft Project. And again, instead of importing from a CSV, we can pick that Microsoft Project and import it into the system. I would say though, there is, when you are importing data from CSV or Microsoft Project, there are certain formatting rules, date formats, etc., that need to be in place to do it. So, probably a little bit of time of, I don't know if massaging the data is correct, but looking at what gets imported and possibly tweaking the data may have to happen. There is a little bit of a wizard where you can map columns coming out of Microsoft Project or a CSV file to the various columns and information within 3DEXPERIENCE Project Management. There was a question here real quick. If companies are using Microsoft Project Management for official project scheduling, do you have a recommendation how to use 3DEXPERIENCE with Microsoft Project? So it's off the top of my head, I'm going to say it's probably one or the other. It's not, there is, I think, possibly an integration between the two where one may update the other. I can look into that more. I don't have all the answers, but from a 3DEXPERIENCE view, they're probably saying, yes, import your project from Microsoft Project, stop using it, and use 3DEXPERIENCE to do all this stuff. In reality, is that something companies will do? Probably not. It's probably going to be more of an evolution or a little bit of both. I think there could be also an integration between the two, so they update each other. I'm not sure how well that works, but I can follow back and get more information on that. Also, it was mentioned that sometimes when you import Microsoft projects, they don't come in tabulated or the dependencies don't show up. I think that is possible to do. It might be just the format of the data, and that's something we can take offline and look into more detail if needed. But I was pretty sure that the information would come in, I would say, tabulated or having the dependencies in place, if that's what I was referring to. But to move on here. Within the task management, and task management is, I would say, usually that traditional project management with tasks, Gantt charts, dependencies, etc. There's various things to make it more functional or pretty. You can change the color of tasks to signify different types of tasks. You can actually change the duration and dependencies on them, make them dependent on each other. You have various views, so you can show a flattened view that just shows the tasks, in a list. You can highlight critical path tasks. They're all different views within the system, and we'll show you that more as we get into the video. And there's views and whatnot to show total float versus free float. So all your project managers out there, you can play with different ways, how float and free float and one task, start to finish or finish to start are all configured and managed in the system. Most, I'd say, project management functional ways of having task dependencies, starts, finish, whether they're dependent or fixed, are all there in the system. Within project management, each task also is a collaborative task within 3DEXPERIENCE. So a project task will also show up within your collaborative tasks. So for those of you familiar with collaborative tasks, and they are almost synonymous with a project task. So if you're assigned a task, you can manage that task and interact with it through the collaborative tasks within 3DEXPERIENCE, or you could do it through the normal task. So when you're assigned a task, you get notified of the task. There's a status of completion, for example, % complete. There's a status, are you working on it? Is it in review? Have you not started it yet? You can have deliverables within the task, and as mentioned, when the deliverable is released, the task becomes complete. And then, there's similar, I'd say, 3DEXPERIENCE functionality around tasks. You can also assign attachments to it. You could place a route on it. So perhaps not only does the user need to complete the task, but it needs to be routed for approval. So, various people need to sign off on it until they officially say that task is complete. We could get into another webinar about routes and how to have these, quote unquote, workflow approvals. You can share the tasks with other users, etc. But the key being, for those familiar with collaborative tasks, a project task is also a collaborative task. Project dashboards. Within a project, you get a dashboard so you can see project progress, slip days, late tasks, overloaded members, milestones, budgets, risks, and issues. And I'd say this dashboard's interactive. So if you click on a late task within the dashboard, it will automatically show those late tasks within the system to look at. So this is a good dashboard to see project status and reporting, and it is interactive. But at the same time, I will say this dashboard is static. So if you want to show different types of information here, you can't really configure or control this dashboard too much, either without customization, or you need that other license, DPM, that project management analytics solution, which gives you a lot more dashboarding, reporting, analytics information. So, keep in mind, you have these project reports, but and they are interactive, but the report is static too. Additionally, you have a risk report where you can show risks and risks levels. If you can see, there's various numbers within these boxes where green are probably low risks, yellow is medium risks, and red are high risks. And you can report on that and look at risks as well. We'll show you a little bit about this within the video. There's also opportunities, and I didn't really talk about opportunities a lot because I would say, admittedly, I'm not super familiar with opportunities, but as there's risks, there's opportunities to gain more than just the project will handle, and you can manage that as well. You have some phase gate reporting. This is only done at the top level, but for each phase or gate, you can see the various tasks, attachments, deliverables associated with it at a status level. So from a high level within a project, you can, per each phase, see where you're at and get a high level overview of where that project stands. Issues and decisions. So I know one customer that is only using projects to manage issues and decisions. So, they'll create various projects for work they're doing, and they'll track all their issues and their decisions within that project as a big bucket, for tracking and keeping that information within the platform. So issues are under the execution tab within the project. Like I said, a great way to keep track of project issues. An issue is accessible from the project or also the 3D dashboard. So there's a 3D dashboard issue widget, and if you create the project within the issue within context of the project, you also see it within the 3D dashboard widget, and you can manage it through that. Issues, again, can be routed for completion using routes, and you can associate documents and other data to issues, on how they can be resolved or resolved. Similar decisions, which are located not under execution, but under collaboration, is a great way to keep track of project decisions that were made for the project. And again, they can also be routed for completion. And a screenshot of a issue within the project and a decision within the project. Deliverables, as mentioned, you can associate deliverables with tasks. You'll see here the deliverable associated to each task. When the deliverable is released, the task becomes 100% complete. And you can create deliverable reports to see the delivered documents associated with the project plan. I should also mention a lot of these reports are also, what you see is what you get. They're hard coded, so if you wanted to configure them, they're limited. But with the DPM module or customizations, different types of reports can be created for you. Some more things, talk about baseline and experiments. As mentioned, you can create multiple experiments by altering schedules, kind of do what-if analysis, how you change things, and see how that affects the critical path, the project plan, etc. Also, you can create baselines, which basically takes a snapshot of the project, and you can do that at regular intervals to have, different baselines of where that project stood at various points in time. Different views, you have a lot of different views within the project. So you can see all different types of views, and then within these views, there are different views. Here's a little bit of a schedule and a task view with resources assigned to it. And this is also a similar view of assigned resources to data. So a little showing, very similar views, but you have, various different views within the system based on what you're looking for. Okay, all that being said, I would say, definitely using project management, there are things to be aware of. So like any system, it's designed to behave one way, but is it best designed for how you work as a company? So, people say, hey, I want project management, I need it, let's implement it, and then boom, we're off to the races managing projects. And before you do that, here are some things to consider. And the first point I say is, what does project management mean to you or mean to your company? I mean, really think about how you're managing projects today and what you're doing. Understand, who is doing project management today, and what are they doing and how are they doing it, and get a good understanding of what is working, what you like, and what's not working within your organization. And take that information, whether that becomes requirements, ways you want to work, etc., and then work to map that to how project management, within 3DEXPERIENCE works. I would say most likely it's not going to be a one-to-one mapping, and then it's a decision. Do you tweak the way you work for how project management works, or do you want to change how 3DEXPERIENCE project management works? And there's no right or wrong answer. It comes down to various pros and cons, how to do that. Also have a good understanding of what can or cannot be configured or customized within project management. So there are a lot of things that can be configured and done out of the box, and there's certain things that can't. I've noticed that certain tasks or processes may seem redundant. So if you want to have the certain information on various tasks, you got to fill it in on all tasks. There's not a way to propagate information from a top level task down. So it works, but sometimes it's a little bit clicky, and that can be annoying to users. So understand what you can and cannot do, and that will help understand how you want to really implement the solution. I talked about some of the advanced functionality within project management, such as timesheets, resource planning, etc. I mean, I think some of those things are great pieces of functionality, but I would say in practice, when companies go to use them, there are areas where they could fall down. They may not have everything you need. So take those with a grain of salt. Before saying yes, we're going to do it, really explore the functionality and understand if it can work for you or it needs to be more configured or customized to you. And now an example here, we had a customer that said, oh, I want to manage timesheets. And then all of a sudden they said, well, we want to manage timesheets, but we need to do them in such a way to handle, research credits, tax-related time versus non-tax time, possibly billing, and the system really was not set up to do that. That doesn't mean that we couldn't configure or customize it to do it, but some of the things that they thought could be done out of the box, wasn't there. So, all that being said, going to implement project management, don't just say, yes, we bought it, let's start using it. Really there's implementation, assessment, functionality mapping that should be done to best implement it in the best way to meet your needs. And maybe you can use it out of the box, but I think you need to assess that first. And then finally, I think sometimes the layout and location of how to get to data, could be changed, where things are auto-named or what tab they're under. Why is decisions under execution, but issues under details? Maybe that you want them in the same place. So some of the layout where you access data may not be super intuitive, and that could be changed as well. At least it can be changed for on-premise customers. So with that, let's jump to the video here. And I would say this video was created during for a presentation with our one of our partner companies, Vias. So you'll see our logo here. So let me switch to that. And the video goes a little bit fast at times. So if there are questions or whatnot, again, please ping me, or we can meet, after the meeting to go over it. But with that, are you guys seeing the video? If you're not seeing it, please put in information into the we start off logging into the platform. And what we're doing is we're going to the project management Gantt widget. So this shows the project management Gantt chart through a widget, 3D dashboard within the platform. And we're going to just kind of move the schedule around, can run certain reports and whatnot within this widget. So we can show all the tasks, we can expand all levels, look at completions. We can show various data on the left and the right of the task. So we are showing who's assigned to the task plus the task description now. By hovering over stuff, you can see information. We can sort or filter the tasks based on different, quote unquote 6W tags. So we can do different sorting and filtering. So now we're just looking at the overdue tasks within the system. I'm going to open the task up in the collaborative task tools. This is the collaborative tasks. As I said, each task is a collaborative task, and we can now, manipulate that task by changing the percent, maturity state, and other information. And depending if you're, assigned to the task or an owner is what you can change. Also, we have comments. So like chatting back and forth, you can put comments on the task, and other users can view those comments and chat, quote unquote, back and forth within the comments. We're setting up dependencies between tasks right now. And again, all this is being done through the dashboard widget. Adding some constraints to the tasks. Changing tasks, changing colors of the tasks. So again, this is various functional things we can do within this widget here. A lot of this demo, though, is really kind of functional. It's more than managing a project. I think you'll get it. In addition, we're bringing up the risk management widget, so you can see that side by side here. And as we go to change things, change risks, etc., we can see how that widget or heat map will change. So you can show risks, based on different times, see where they stand, see the list of the risks that could be worked on. So similar to managing a cloud of tasks or whatnot, we can change that risk, provide information on it, etc. If we complete the risk, it goes away and it's removed, from the dashboard. You can also filter filter projects and whatnot based on 6W tags and the risk. So we'll move this to in work. We're working on the risk. And if we go back to the project plan, for example, oh, I'm sorry. Here, we'll go back here. We're showing basically went through. We're showing a project that has sub-projects in it. So we're showing how we can have projects and sub-projects. I was muted. I'm sorry. I don't know how much you missed my narration, but I'm going to pause this again and go back here, hopefully. Here we go. So I don't know how much I was muted. I apologize, but what you're seeing here is the cloud-only solution for agile project management. So this has functionality to do on cloud through the dashboard, but does not have all the functionality that the DPA solution has within the system. And you can see we're creating some tasks. We're setting a fixed start date and end date. And that date is fixed. We can zoom in and zoom out per the calendar. We can set up dependencies between the tasks. And because that task is dependent and has fixed time, it will shrink based on that fixed time amount. If we changed it from a fixed time to dependency time, we can see that that time will change now based on it being dependent on tasks versus a fixed point in time. Here's the list of tasks. Obviously based on where you stand, you can move tasks to end work, assign tasks to various people, whether they're a leader, which can modify the task more, an author that just needs to do the task, or a viewer which just sees the tasks. I'd say not an assignee is the person that works on the task. Again, we can chat, we can put chats in, likes, dislikes about the task, about the chat comment, to better collaborate around it. And then once the user's done, the task can be moved to completed. This is, the collaborative task functionality, like I've shown before, very much Kanban style for managing tasks within 3DEXPERIENCE. And then there's some charts, to look at that are interactive of where that project stands, from milestones, tasks, burn down rate, etc. And obviously, as we complete tasks, these charts are interactive and get modified accordingly. So we'll We can see those interactively changing as you make change to the project. So now we're going back to the DPJ, kind of what the majority of the PowerPoint or the presentation's on. This is the traditional project management solution. And as you can see, we're looking at a Gantt chart here, structured view of the tasks, and we're simply showing you how we can add a task to the project plan and fill in various information about that task. So we added that task to the project plan. I think we added it as a milestone. We can have different views. Here's a flattened view of everything, and if you want, we can create a printer-friendly view of that. We can also export that to Excel. So we talk about interoperability between project and Excel. One thought, I'm not saying this is the right way to do it, but you could export your project from 3DEXPERIENCE and import it to Microsoft Project this way, or vice versa. I'm not saying that's a best practice, but that's an option. Definitely there's Gantt charts, milestones, and various views within the system. We're going to switch it now to a assignment view. So this is where we can assign various people on the project to tasks. So by simply kind of have a grid here, if you can see it, we only have 2 resources to be used on this project. But by simply clicking the grid, we're assigning these resources to the project. Now from this view, we can say how much are they allocated to the task. So if 2 resources, for example, are allocated to a task, we can say, we only want to allocate 50% of them to that task. Execution, this is where we have issues. We mentioned issues, but we can create an issue in the system, project-related issues. And there's various information on that issue that we can set up. And the issue gets added to the system. Also, we can create risks in the system. We talked about risks. We can create a risk. For example, we don't have resources available. Fill in various, metadata about that risk. And the risk, it's a risk number. And the risk number is a combination of what you see here, the probability the risk will happen and the impact. So those 2 numbers get multiplied, and that becomes your risk factor. In this case, as you can see, the risk factor was 16 under the risk factor column. Looking at reports, we see that risk now shows up in our business status risk report. It's interactive. You can go right there from there to the risk, view it, and see it. Here are the various people assigned to the project. We're going to talk about, we'll get back to that in a second. In this case, we're creating a decision. So maybe to handle the risk, we made a decision to hire more people. So we're adding this decision to the system to hire more people. And we're also creating a discussion in the system. So maybe before we approve the decision, we want to have a discussion and have a meeting about it. So we're also going to have a meeting that we're going to record in the system. Now, is it practical to do all that stuff? It depends on your business cases, but all this stuff is now managed within the system that we we had a meeting, we had a discussion, and we had a decision. All that's set in stone with your project. What's kind of cool about the meetings here, as you'll see, is we're scheduling this meeting within 3D Experience. And we're going to now take, in a second here, we're going to schedule the meeting. And what happens is, if everything's configured right, the meeting actually shows up within Outlook as a meeting. And various 3D Experience data will also show up within Outlook. You have to have the Office integration enabled, but by adding different things such as agenda topics, and perhaps decision points, to that meeting, we can now see that if we go to those tabs, we see that information show up here as well. And also the metadata associated with the meeting information. So it shows a little bit of collaboration with Outlook. We're now going to eventually approve the decision. And associate the decision. Once we approve it, it shows up with the project there. So here we're going to show this how we can associate multiple projects, to a top level project to be associated with multiple projects. So we just pick the project and we're going to pick multiple sub projects to link them to as children. We're going to approve our risk here. And when we do it, you see the risk here, but once we resolve it or complete it, it now goes away from the view or the chart because it's completed or resolved. Likewise with issues, we put it through its process and complete it. The issue goes away from the dashboard. And our issues are green, everything's complete. Bookmarks are a way to attach documents to projects. So we're just going to create a bookmark here, and you can have bookmarks attached to the project, attached to the tasks, or general bookmarks. You can create various bookmarks. They're just ways to organize documents within the project. And now we will attach some documents to the project. This is a report of what's attached to the document. We're going to attach some documents here. You can do it by drag and drop. Or we can search for existing documents within the system. We're going to run the report, and we can see how we have, what documents are associated with the project. From a where used point of view, you can see that documents in that bookmark. Finally, we're going to create a program here. A program is a collection of projects. And then link existing projects to the program. So we're going a little bit over time here, but hopefully everyone can stay on. We're going to be finishing up fairly soon. But yes, we're linking projects to the program now. And if you go to the program dashboard, you can see various statuses for all the projects within that program. You can also see various issues, risks, and opportunities associated to, all those projects within that program as well. So finally, we're going to show you a little bit about, before we do that, I guess we're adding an issue to a project, or a couple issues to a project. And then if we go back to the program, we can see that those issues are showing up per the various projects we have within our program. So we can, for that high level overview, you can look at the program as a whole, not individual projects. Finally, we're going to talk about timesheets here. So this is the timesheet functionality. So basically, a user would say, what week do I want to report time against? And they can pick that week. And then for that week, they can say, what project tasks do I want to associate my time with? So they can pick a project task. From a project. And then per that task, they can put time they spent on it during that week. They submit it for approval. And then their quote unquote manager would see that approval. They get an email that they have something to approve. They can go to their approval tab, see what they need to approve for that week. And then approve it or reject it. In this case, we're rejecting it. And then the user says, show me what I have to work on, what was rejected. You can open it up again, change the time, put comments in, whatever, change the time and resubmit it. So with that, let's switch back here. So with that, to come to conclusion, we would say, before starting project management within 3DEXPERIENCE, really make sure, you understand the functionality of it, what your goals within the company are to use it. Is it to use it for every project, a specific project, only certain types of projects, and really, make sure to map your functionality of how you want to perform project management to the 3DEXPERIENCE roles and functionality. Templates are really a great way to kickstart new projects. Key is building those good templates to begin with and using them as a starting place to start your projects. And the advanced project management features, timesheets, some of the reports, etc., may require additional services to harness the true value from them. We found where there are things lacking when users start to use some of those points, but are great things to use in general. So with that being said, thank you for your time, and here's my contact information. If you have any questions, please type them in now. I see some people have already done that, so I will answer the questions, but also feel free to reach out to me if you want to discuss individually. So with that being said, let's see some of the questions here. Okay, so are you saying project tasks can trigger routes and release items? So yes, so a project task can be configured. So a task has a life cycle, draft, to do, in approvals, and complete. So we can associate routes to tasks that when the task gets into that approvals, it kicks off a route, and that route will go to other people. And when that route is done, it will make that task automatically completed. Will it release like items like the deliverable associated to the task? Out of the box, I don't think so. I think you need a little bit of customization to do that. We can get back to you. I don't know if it does that out of the box, but that's a perfect example of how you want the system to behave and how you need some configuration or customization to make it work that way. I see that as a very legitimate request and something that can be done. Next question. Project management seems to be set up to manage objects within project management, issues, tasks, decisions, but only indirectly. It seems to manage it, but only indirectly does it manage typical 3D objects like products, documents, drawings, etc. Is there a way in 3DX to directly manage completion of products, drawings, and documents? So I would say, I guess it depends on how you look at it. Obviously, if you set up project documents, drawings, physical products, etc., as deliverables, they're right there, and as you release it within project management, it gets completed. Or perhaps you have a task within project management to do a review on a certain, item. So in one way, yes, it does it. I see what you mean by indirectly does it, but through, again, configuration, customization, we can glue all that together better. So yeah, I guess at the end of the day, I think some of that stuff, which you're referring to, is a little bit manual to do, but we definitely can glue things together, based on rules, logic, and various customer requirements. Programs versus projects. So I'd say a project is everything you see managing projects. Programs are really just a way to group projects. It's a grouping of projects, but you get some reporting on top of that. So you get some reporting of all the projects within the program, not just the project itself. But at the end of the day, there's not a lot of functionality around programs. It's just basically a way to group projects. So it also mentioned here that says, quote unquote, a lot of the project info, doesn't get backed up. It's easier, for a user to make changes, and then your project messed up. So I would say, again, this can be tedious, but it really comes down to how you use projects, how your permissions are set up in the system, what your role is, whether you're a leader or an author or a participant on the project. And then it's very important to understand what state the objects of the project are in. So depending, on the project has a state, whether it's in work, draft, etc. Tasks have states on them. So depending on the state the project is in or the task is in, will control whether you can make changes or not. Now, again, some of that can be tedious, and sometimes you can put the project in work state, and then you can't change the tasks, and you need to move it back. So there is some back and forth that needs to be done, which again can be tedious, and this is where automation gets in place. But yes, if people are making changes and they're not supposed to make changes, we need to understand where they're making changes, and then whether it's a permission, a state thing, or something else to prevent that from happening. So, you know, if you just keep everything in draft, it is very loosey-goosey. But if you do make use of those states and permissions, it locks things down more, but then it makes it harder to change things. So it's, again, like anything in the system, it's a trade-off. That looks like all the questions for now. I hope you enjoyed the webinar. I apologize if I was muted at times, but you know, please reach out to me with any additional questions or comments. I'm happy to take any of these discussions offline and discuss them with you. So with that, I would say going once or twice. I'll stay on here for one more minute, but unless I hear any other questions, I will end the webinar.